The snow fell gently over the quiet town, covering rooftops and streets in a soft, pure blanket that reflected the pale glow of Christmas lights. And for Lily Carter, walking home from the diner that evening felt heavier than usual, not because of the cold or her tired legs, but because her heart carried the weight of memories, regrets, and a growing hope she did not dare admit. And as she unlocked her small apartment door, her thoughts drifted to Alexander Reed, the man who had upset everything she believed about wealth, love, and fairness. Because despite the fear and the anger, a part of her had longed for him. Even as she told herself he was a man of power who could never understand the life of someone like her, yet somehow, the small kindnesses he had shown, the moments he had noticed her humanity rather than her social status, had planted a seed that refused to die. And as she sat alone that night, looking at the sparse Christmas decorations she had hung, Lily thought about how strange life could be, how a single night could change everything, and she did not know that across the city, Alexander Reed, sitting alone in his penthouse, surrounded by documents, contracts, and the weight of exposed corruption, felt the same emptiness, the same ache, the same pull towards someone he had barely known for a few hours, yet whose presence had become impossible to ignore. And for weeks, he had searched, questioned, investigated, and finally traced her small apartment in this quiet town. And as he drove through the snow-covered streets that night, Alexander did not bring gifts, or money, or even promises, because he had learned that those things meant nothing in the face of trust, pain, and the truth that Lily carried. And when he arrived outside her building, he did not rush in or knock. He simply waited, quietly, hoping she would open the door on her own terms, hoping she could see him as a man, not a billionaire. And as Lily approached her apartment door, fumbling with keys, her heart skipped when she noticed a figure standing silently under the dim street light, the snow catching in his hair and coat, a quiet presence that made her pulse quicken. And for a moment, fear surged, fear that he had come to lecture her, to demand an explanation, to ruin the fragile peace she had built. But something in his eyes, calm, steady, and patient, made her stop and look closer. And when Alexander finally spoke, his voice low and steady in the cold night air, he did not mention money. He did not mention status. He did not even mention the past. He only said, "I wanted to make sure you're safe." And Lily's chest tightened, because in those simple words, she felt more care than she had ever received from anyone in her entire life. And tears she had been holding back since the hotel fell freely as she whispered, I'm fine." Unsure if she could even believe it, unsure if she could believe him. And Alexander took a small step forward, careful, respectful, his hand open but empty, a gesture of trust, a silent way of saying, "I am not here to control you, only to be with you." And in that moment, the first miracle of the night unfolded quietly, not with fireworks or loud celebration, but with recognition that love could exist beyond wealth, beyond status, beyond power, and that the heart, once it chooses, he does not care for social divides. And as they stood together under the falling snow, memories of the hotel came rushing back. The shattered glass, the elite women, the silent war, the fire of jealousy and anger. And Lily realized that all of that pain had led to this moment, that the cruelty of the world had not broken her completely, and that sometimes the most important thing was simply being seen by someone who understood, someone who cared. And Alexander felt it too, the weight of the past, the injustice he had benefited from, the mistakes he had made, and yet the hope that now he could begin to make it right, not with money, not with influence, but with honesty, trust, and the courage to love someone fully, even when the world opposed him. And as snowflakes settled on their shoulders and eyelashes, Lily finally found the courage to ask the question that had been in her heart since the hotel. "Why me?" And Alexander smiled, softly, a mixture of sadness, awe, and quiet determination in his eyes. And he replied, "Because you are real, because you are kind, because you've lived a life I could never understand until I saw it, because I want to be better for you." And Lily's heart skipped a beat, because no one had ever said anything like that to her, because no one had ever looked at her as if she mattered more than their own comfort, more than power, more than pride. And for the first time, she felt the truth of something she had been denying, that love could exist, even for a poor waitress, in a world ruled by money. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by snow, they slowly moved closer, the distance closing not with force, but with mutual consent, their hands brushing, tentative at first, then holding, the warmth of contact more powerful than any fire. Because it was trust, honesty, and care all at once. And as they stood together, Alexander reached into his coat pocket and pulled out nothing but a simple ribbon he had bought earlier that day, a small gesture, a token, not of wealth, but of thoughtfulness. And he placed it gently around a stray strand of Lily's hair that had fallen into her face. tying it loosely as a symbol that he was not trying to own her, only to honor her. And Lily laughed softly, a sound she had not made in weeks, the tension in her chest easing as she realized that she could finally breathe again, that she could finally allow herself to feel something besides fear. And as they walked slowly toward the small cafe where Lily had spent her days working, talking quietly about everything and nothing, Alexander telling her about his choices, about the battles he had fought against corruption, about the women who had tried to stop him, and Lily telling him about her father, her mother, her struggles, and the life she had built from nothing, they discovered a connection deeper than attraction, deeper than admiration, a recognition of survival, courage, and mutual respect. And when they finally reached the small cafe, now closed for the night, Alexander took Lily's hand in both of his, looking straight into her eyes, and promised not just love, but protection, honesty, and partnership, not in the sense of wealth or influence, but in the sense of two human beings facing the world together. And Lily, for the first time in years, felt safe to believe, to hope, to dream, that love did not have to be complicated by money, by status, or by fear. And as they stepped outside, again, into the softly falling snow, they noticed the faint glow of Christmas lights in the town square, children laughing in the distance, couples walking hand in hand, and the quiet realization hit them both that their love story, begun in the midst of power, envy, and cruelty, had survived because it had been true, because it had been honest, and because it had been chosen freely, not imposed. And in that moment, Alexander kissed Lily's forehead gently, a kiss that spoke of protection, devotion, and a lifetime of care, and Lily pressed her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, a rhythm that matched her own. And as the night stretched on, with snowflakes settling like a blanket over the world, the impossible miracle of Christmas revealed itself, that two hearts from opposite worlds, one rich and powerful, one poor and struggling, could meet, recognize each other, and choose love despite every obstacle, every expectation, and every fear. And in the days that followed, their story became a quiet legend in the city, a tale told not for gossip, but for hope, because people saw that courage, kindness, and truth could overcome even the harshest divides, that a poor waitress could change a millionaire's life as much as he changed hers, and that love, when Ria, does not care about wealth, status, or social expectation. It only cares about hearts meeting, understanding, and choosing each other. And as snow continued to fall that Christmas night, Lily and Alexander walked side by side through empty streets, their hands entwined, their smiles soft but unshakable, knowing that the world might still challenge them, that the elite women might still fume in distant penthouses, that life would continue to test them, but it could never take away this moment, this choice, this miracle. Because on that snowy Christmas night, two hearts had finally found home, in each other, and the world, for once, was quiet enough to witness the power of love itself. Lily disappeared quietly, like someone who had learned long ago that the safest way to survive was to leave no trace behind. And by the time the sun rose over the city, she was already gone, riding a crowded bus toward a place where no one knew her name, carrying only a small bag and a heart heavy with fear and love she believed she could never afford. While Alexander woke that morning with an uneasy feeling he could not explain, a deep restlessness that refused to leave him. And when he tried Lily's number again and heard only silence, something inside him told him this was not just distance, this was escape. And that fear pushed him into action faster than any business crisis ever had. Because for the first time in his life, losing control did not scare him. Losing Lily did. And he began searching for her in every way he could. Not by sending assistance or using influence, but by walking into places himself, visiting the cafe where she had worked, speaking to people who usually bowed to his name but now looked at him with confusion. Because a man like Alexander Reed did not chase waitresses. And when he learned that Lily had quit suddenly and left without explanation, his worry deepened into guilt, because he finally understood that his presence had brought danger into her life. And instead of stepping away as everyone expected, Alexander made a decision that shocked even his closest advisors. He stopped running from the truth, and as he dug deeper into the company records connected to the elite women and their families, he uncovered layers of corruption, hidden contracts, and silent settlements, each one protecting powerful people while destroying workers' lives. And among those names, he found Lily's father, listed not as a victim, but as a resolved issue, words that made Alexander's hands shake with anger, because this system had helped build his wealth, and now he could no longer pretend he was innocent. And while Lily tried to start over in a small town where Christmas lights still hung in quiet streets, working long hours at a roadside diner, and sleeping in a shared room, she thought of Alexander more than she wanted to admit, wondering if he hated her for leaving, or if he had already forgotten her because men like him always moved on. And she told herself again and again that love was a luxury for people who were safe, not for someone always running. But back in the city, Alexander stood in front of cameras and board members and made the most unexpected move of his career, publicly ending partnerships worth millions. Stepping away from deals tied to corruption and announcing an internal investigation that named powerful families everyone feared. A move that sent shockwaves through the business world. Because Alexander Reed had always played smart, never emotional, and now he was burning bridges without fear. And when reporters asked why, he gave a simple answer that confused and angered many, because silence destroys lives. Words that made headlines overnight. And while elite circles whispered that he had lost his mind, that a poor girl had ruined him, Alexander felt something close to peace for the first time, because even if he lost everything, he was finally standing on the right side of truth. And as pressure increased, threats arrived. Subtle warnings wrapped in polite language. But Alexander did not stop, because this was no longer about money or reputation. It was about correcting a wrong that had haunted Lily's life. And when he finally traced Lily's location through careful, respectful effort, not force, he did not rush to her. Knowing that finding her was not enough, he had to become someone worthy of being found. And far away, in that quiet town, Lily heard his name on the radio one evening while cleaning tables. Hearing about the millionaire who walked away from power and exposed corruption, and her hands froze, her heart pounding. Because deep down she knew this was not a coincidence. And for the first time since she left, Lily allowed herself to hope. Not that love would save her, but that truth might finally free her. And as snow began to fall again, almost like the night they met, the city watched in shock as Alexander Reed continued to choose integrity over wealth, love over pride, and a poor waitress over a world that had once bowed at his feet, proving that some choices change not just one life, but many, and that the most powerful decision a man can make is not who he controls, but who he protects. Lily's disappearance did not make the danger disappear. Instead, it changed its shape. Because when someone, like Alexander Reed, refused to play by the old rules, the world he had stepped away from did not forgive easily. And while Lily tried to rebuild her life in silence, unaware of how deeply Alexander had begun to tear the system apart, the city buzzed with rumors, headlines, and quiet fear. Because powerful people understood one thing very well. When a man with nothing to lose starts telling the truth, everyone becomes exposed, and Alexander had reached that point faster than anyone expected. As days turned into sleepless nights for him, nights spent reading documents, listening to old recordings, reviewing reports that painted a dark picture of how wealth had been protected at the cost of human lives. And with every page he read, Lily's face appeared in his mind, not as a reason for revenge, but as a reminder of why silence was no longer an option, and his advisors begged him to stop, warning him that walking away from elite partnerships could destroy everything he had built. But Alexander surprised them all by calmly replying that everything built on injustice deserved to fall. Words that spread quickly through boardrooms and private clubs, causing panic among those who believed themselves untouchable. While Lily, far away from this storm, lived a quiet, difficult routine, waking before sunrise to work long shifts at the diner, saving every coin, and pretending she did not notice the ache in her chest whenever she heard Christmas music still playing on old radios, reminding her of the night her life changed. And though she tried to convince herself that leaving Alexander behind was the right decision, doubt followed her, like a shadow. Because deep down, she knew that the man she met that night was different. And it hurt to wonder if she had judged him too quickly. But survival left little room for reflection, especially when her mother's health worsened and medical bills began to pile up again, pushing Lily to the edge of exhaustion. And one evening, as she cleaned tables after closing, she overheard customers talking about Alexander Reed, about how he had shocked the business world by closing factories, compensating families, and reopening old cases that everyone believed were buried forever. And Lily froze when she heard her father's company name mentioned, her heart racing as fear and hope collided. Because no one had spoken that name out loud in years. And for the first time since her father's death, Lily felt something crack open inside her, the possibility that truth might finally be seen. While Alexander faced increasing pressure from all sides, his phone filled with threats, disguised as advice, investors pulling out, friends turning distant, and yet he did not slow down, because every step back would mean returning to the man he used to be, a man who benefited from a broken system, without asking who paid the price. And as he publicly apologized to families affected by past decisions, standing in front of cameras without excuses, people began to see him not as a fallen billionaire, but as a man willing to take responsibility. A rare sight in a world where power usually hid behind lawyers and silence. And this shift frightened the elite women more than anything else, because their influence depended on the belief that power was permanent. And now that belief was cracking, and they tried one last move, leaking stories that painted Lily as a manipulator, a poor girl who had trapped a rich man for attention, hoping to destroy her image before Alexander could find her. But the plan backfired, because instead of anger, the public responded with sympathy, questioning why a waitress was being blamed while billionaires walked free. And for the first time, the conversation shifted away from gossip toward accountability. And as Lily saw these stories online, her hands trembling as she read cruel comments mixed with unexpected support, she realized that running had not protected her after all, that hurt silence had allowed others to define her story. And that realization planted a quiet strength inside her. While Alexander, finally tracing Lily's location through respectful inquiry rather than force, stood at the edge of her town one cold evening, not rushing to see her, choosing instead to wait, because he understood now that love built on pressure was no different from power used badly. And when Lily finally heard a knock at the diner door after closing, and saw Alexander standing there without a suit, without guards, without confidence, just a man holding regret and hope in equal measure, time seemed to pause, because this meeting was no longer about attraction or curiosity. It was about whether two people from opposite worlds could stand together without fear. And Alexander did not ask for forgiveness, did not offer money, did not promise safety. He only told her the truth. About her father, about the system, about his choice to walk away from power to make things right. And Lily listened silently, tears falling freely, not because she was weak, but because someone had finally spoken the truth she had waited years to hear. And in that moment, Lily understood that Alexander's greatest sacrifice was not his wealth, but his identity, because he had chosen to become someone new, someone who no longer hid behind privilege. And as the city continued to react in shock, Lily stood outside the Grand Aurora Hotel for a long moment after being fired, the cold air biting her skin while people walked past her without a second glance, laughing, talking, carrying gifts, living lives that felt very far away from her own. And she held her small bag tightly as if it was the only proof that she still existed, her mind replaying the manager's words again and again, not because they were loud or cruel, but because they were empty, said with the calm voice of someone who knew he would never face consequences. And as she slowly started walking, her boots crunching against the snow, Lily felt the familiar feeling of being pushed out of a place where she never truly belonged, a feeling she had known since childhood, since the day her world first broke apart. And while the city prepared for Christmas celebrations, Lily's thoughts drifted backward to memories she tried every day to forget. Memories of a small home filled with warmth, once of her father coming home late at night with tired eyes but a gentle smile, always telling her that honesty mattered more than money, that dignity mattered more than power, words that had shaped her life even after he was gone. And she remembered the night everything changed. The phone call, the rushed voices, the hospital, lights too bright and too cold, the doctors avoiding her eyes, and her mother's hands shaking as they were told that the company responsible would take care of everything. A promise that meant silence, money they never truly received, and a case that disappeared without justice, because the men responsible were rich, connected, and untouchable. And from that day, Lily learned a painful truth that money could erase mistakes, that powerful people never paid the same price as everyone else, and that trusting them only led to loss. And as she walked toward the bus stop, holding back tears, Lily promised herself once again that she would never allow herself to believe in kindness from rich men, no matter how gentle their voices sounded, because kindness without responsibility was just another lie. And yet, despite her resolve, Alexander's face appeared in her thoughts. The way he had knelt to pick up broken glass, the way he had spoken to her like she mattered. And this confusion hurt more than anger, because it cracked the walls she had built around her heart, walls she believed were necessary to survive. And as Lily reached the cafe where she worked part-time, she forced a smile and tied on her apron, ready to serve customers with the same politeness she always showed. But inside her chest, fear grew stronger, because losing the hotel job meant losing most of her income, and without it, she did not know how she would pay rent, buy medicine for her mother, or even afford food next month. And while she poured coffee and wiped tables, her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from her landlord asking about late rent. And Lily's hands shook as she typed a short reply, promising payment soon, even though she had no idea how she would keep that promise. And somewhere across the city, Alexander sat in his office, surrounded by glass walls and quiet luxury, staring at documents without reading them, his assistant speaking about investments and schedules while his thoughts stayed stuck on a poor waitress he barely knew. And for the first time in years, numbers felt meaningless to him, because no amount of profit could explain the feeling he had experienced the night before. A feeling that made him question the world he lived in, and when he finally dismissed his assistant and leaned back in his chair, Alexander realized that Lily's words about Christmas promises had stayed with him, because they sounded like someone who had been disappointed too many times, and driven by a strange impulse he did not fully understand, he decided to return to the hotel, not for business, but to see her again, unaware that she was already gone. And when he arrived and asked for Lily by name, the staff avoided his eyes, their silence telling him more than words ever could. And when the manager finally admitted that Lily had been let go due to complaints, Alexander felt a surge of anger so strong it surprised even him, because this was not about rules. This was about power being used carelessly. And as he left the hotel, again, Alexander made a quiet decision to find Lily, not to fix things with money, but to understand her. To understand why her pain felt so familiar to his own loneliness, while Lily finished her shift at the cafe late that evening, exhausted and numb, and as she walked home under dim streetlights, her phone rang, displaying a number she did not recognize, and for a moment she considered ignoring it, because unknown calls often brought bad news. But something inside her pushed her to answer, and when she heard Alexander's voice on the other end, calm and respectful, asking if she was okay, Lily's heart dropped, fear and anger mixing together, because she believed this call meant trouble, meant pity, meant offers she did not want, and she quickly told him she was fine and asked him not to contact her again, her voice firm but shaking, and Alexander listened silently, hearing the pain behind her words, choosing not to argue, only saying that he was sorry for what had happened and that he hoped she stayed safe. And when the call ended, Lily leaned against a wall and finally let tears fall, because part of her wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that someone powerful could care without expecting anything in return. But her past screamed louder, reminding her of broken promises and buried truths. And that night, as Lily sat alone in her dark room, counting the money she had left, she took out an old photograph of her father, tracing his face with trembling fingers, whispering that she was trying, that she was still standing. Even when the world pushed her down and she did not know that Alexander, sitting alone in his penthouse, was staring out at the same falling snow, feeling the weight of a responsibility he had ignored for years, because Lily's secret, her pain rooted in injustice caused by wealth and power, was slowly pulling him toward a truth he could no longer avoid. A truth that would force him to choose between the world that made him rich and the love that was beginning to change him. The days after Christmas passed slowly, but the silence between Lily and Alexander was heavy and painful, because even though they were apart, their lives were moving toward the same storm, and Lily felt it first, when small problems began to stack like falling bricks, one after another, until she could barely breathe under their weight. Starting with the cafe owner cutting her hours without explanation, apologizing softly but avoiding her eyes, clearly afraid of someone or something, and then her landlord, leaving another message, this time less polite, reminding her that kindness had limits. And Lily understood the pattern too well, because she had seen it before. How power worked quietly in the background, how people were pressured without being told why. And as she walked home that evening, clutching her coat against the cold, she realized that losing the hotel job was not the end of her trouble. It was only the beginning. While across the city, Alexander was fighting a different battle, one he had never faced before, because for the first time, his name was being used against someone innocent, and whispers reached him through business partners and assistants, vague warnings about staying in his lane and not getting distracted, comments that made it clear the elite women were not done. And when Alexander confronted one of them directly, Sophia smiled calmly and told him that the world worked a certain way, that people like Lily were fragile and accidents happened. Is Lily? Her words smooth but threatening, and Alexander felt something dark rise inside him, because he finally understood how cruel power could be when it felt challenged. And that understanding changed him, pushing him to act, not as a businessman, but as a man with a conscience. And when he tried to reach Lily again, wanting to warn her, to protect her, he found her number blocked, her door unanswered, and for the first time, money could not open the door he needed, while Lily, unaware of how close danger truly was, focused only on survival, selling small personal items, skipping meals, and pretending everything was fine when she spoke to her mother on the phone. Because she did not want to add more worry to an already fragile heart, and yet, even in her exhaustion, Lily felt watched, followed by strange coincidences, like strangers asking questions at the cafe or neighbors suddenly becoming distant, and fear slowly replaced sadness, because this no longer felt like bad luck, it felt planned. And the breaking point came one evening when Lily returned home to find an eviction notice taped to her door. Legal language hiding cruelty, giving her only days to leave, and as she slid down the wall and sat on the cold floor, holding the paper and shaking hands. Lily finally understood that her past had caught up with her, that powerful people never forgot challenges, and that kindness, no matter how real it felt, had placed a target on her back. And in that moment, she made a painful decision, believing it was the only way to survive, to disappear completely, to remove herself from Alexander's world before it destroyed what little she had left, while Alexander, sensing something was terribly wrong, pushed back harder than ever before, digging into old company records, uncovering names, dates, and hidden deals. Discovering links between the elite women's families and the company responsible for his own past successes, and realizing with growing horror that the system he had benefited from was built on the suffering of people like Lily's father. And this truth shook him deeply. The night moved forward, but the warmth of Christmas inside the Grand Aurora Hotel slowly turned cold beneath the smiles. Because the moment Alexander Reed chose to sit apart from the elite circle and quietly speak to a poor waitress, an invisible line had been crossed, and the 7 women who were used to being admired, obeyed, and desired, felt something they had not felt in years, threat. And as Lily returned to work after her short break, her heart still racing from the strange kindness of a man she believed was just a polite guest. She sensed the change around her even without understanding it. The air heavier, the laughter sharper, the looks colder. And while she moved carefully between tables, holding her tray like a shield, the 7 women began their silent attack, each in her own way. Because powerful people rarely fight openly. They fight quietly, where the victim never sees the hand that strikes. And Sophia was the first to act, her voice sweet and calm as she called Lily again, asking for a different drink, then another, then changing her order just as Lily returned, watching with cold satisfaction as the waitress's steps grew quicker and her breathing shorter, while Isabella leaned toward her friends, laughing softly and speaking loudly enough for Lily to hear words like pathetic and girls like that dreamed too much. Words wrapped in humor but sharp enough to cut, and Victoria, the most dangerous of them all, smiled politely while pulling the hotel manager aside, reminding him of business meetings, sponsorships, and the importance of keeping elite guests happy on such an important night. Her eyes briefly flicking toward Lily before she turned away, and the manager understood the message clearly, because in his world, rich voices mattered more than truth, and Lily, unaware of these conversations, kept working, her feet aching, her fingers sore, her mind drifting to her mother, alone at home, probably waiting for a call that Lily might not have time to make, reminding herself that this was just one more night, just one more shift, and then it would be over. But Alexander noticed everything, because once he saw Lily, he could not unsee her. And every time she was called sharply, every time her shoulders flinched at a harsh tone, something inside him tightened, a feeling that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with fairness. And when he finally stood up again, the room seemed to pause, because people were used to reacting to Alexander's movements. And he walked directly toward Sophia's table, politely but firmly telling her that the staff was working hard and deserved respect. His tone calm but final, and Sophia's smile froze for a second before she laughed lightly, pretending it was all a misunderstanding, but inside, her pride burned, because no man had ever corrected her in public. And as Alexander walked away without waiting for her response, the 7 women exchanged looks that said more than words ever could. This was no longer a small distraction. This waitress had become a problem, and problems like Lily were usually removed, quietly and completely, while Lily herself began to feel something was wrong. Not because anyone shouted at her, but because kindness around her felt rare and dangerous. And when Alexander spoke to her again near the dessert table, asking her if she liked Christmas, Lily answered honestly, saying she liked the lights but not the promises, because promises usually broke. And Alexander smiled sadly at her words, sensing pain behind them, wanting to ask more but knowing this was not the place. And as they spoke, a sudden voice cut in, Isabella stepping between them with perfect posture and a bright smile, introducing herself to Alexander as if Lily was not even there, her tone friendly but her eyes sharp, and Lily instinctively stepped back, feeling small again, feeling foolish for thinking she mattered for even a moment. And Alexander noticed that too, the way Lily retreated like someone used to being pushed aside, and it made something inside him harden, because wealth had never taught him how cruel people could be to those with nothing. And as the music grew louder and the night moved closer to midnight, the silent war turned darker, because Victoria's words to the manager began to take shape, and Lily was suddenly called into the back hallway, where the manager spoke to her with cold professionalism, reminding her of mistakes, of rules, of expectations, warning her that any more problems would not be tolerated. And Lily nodded quickly, apologizing even though she did not fully understand what she had done wrong, and when she returned to the hall, her eyes were glossy but dry, because she had learned long ago that crying at work only made things worse. And Alexander saw that change immediately, the quiet sadness settling deeper in her face, and he felt anger rise again, stronger this time, because no one had the right to break someone down like that, especially on Christmas. And when midnight finally arrived and the guests gathered for a toast, the 7 elite women stood confidently at the front, glasses raised, ready to claim the moment. But Alexander did not join them. Instead, he stayed near the edge of the room, watching Lily serve one last round of drinks. And when the countdown ended and cheers filled the hall, Alexander made a decision that shocked everyone watching. He raised his glass, not toward the elite women, but toward Lily, offering her a quiet smile of respect. A gesture so small yet so powerful that it sent a wave of shock through the room. Because in that world, acknowledgement was everything, and Lily froze, unsure if the moment was real or imagined, her heart pounding as she nodded politely, not knowing she had just become the center of attention for the wrong people. And as the party slowly began to wind down, the 7 women gathered together, their laughter gone, their voices low, agreeing without saying it out loud that this situation could not continue. Because if a poor waitress could catch Alexander Reed's attention, then their power meant nothing, and power, once challenged, always fights back. While Lily finished her shift exhausted, unaware that her name was already being spoken in quiet corners, that plans were being formed without her knowledge, and that the kindness she had felt tonight was about to bring pain into her life. And as Alexander left the hotel, stepping into the cold night air, snow falling softly around him, he looked back once more through the glass walls, searching for Lily, feeling a strange pull in his chest, not knowing why this one night, this one girl, mattered so much, only knowing that something had started. Something that would not end easily, because when love enters a world ruled by money and power, it never comes without a fight. Christmas morning arrived quietly, with pale sunlight, resting on snow-covered streets, but inside Lily Carter's small rented room, there was no feeling of celebration, only the heavy silence of worry, because her body ached from the long night, and her mind replayed every moment from the hotel. Especially the strange kindness of Alexander and the cold looks from the elite women, and as she sat on the edge of her bed tying her worn shoes, she told herself again and again that she must forget everything, that rich people lived in a different world and their attention always came with a price, a lesson life had taught her too many times. And yet, she could not stop thinking about Alexander's eyes, calm and honest, so different from the sharp stares she was used to. And while Lily prepared to leave for her second job at a small cafe across town, her phone buzzed with a message from the hotel asking her to come in early, a message that made her stomach tighten with fear, because early calls were never good news. And as she traveled through the cold city, holding her thin coat close, memories she tried to bury slowly surfaced, memories of her father, a kind man who once worked as a night guard for a powerful company, a man who believed in hard work and honesty. Until one careless decision by rich executives led to a tragic accident that took his life, an accident that was quietly buried with money and influence, leaving Lily and her mother with nothing but grief and unanswered questions. And from that day on, Lily learned to distrust wealth, to believe that rich people lived above consequences, and when she arrived at the hotel and was called into the manager's office, her heart already knew what was coming. And as the manager spoke about guest complaints and unprofessional behavior, Lily listened silently, her hands clenched, understanding that the truth did not matter, only power did. And when he finally told her that her services were no longer needed, thus she should collect her things and leave, Lily felt a sharp pain in her chest but did not cry, because she had learned that tears never changed decisions. And as she walked out of the hotel in daylight, past the same glass doors that had felt magical the night before, she realized how quickly dreams turned into lessons. And at that exact moment, across the city, Alexander sat in his car, unable to focus on business calls. His thoughts stuck on the waitress with tired eyes and quiet strength, unaware that while he was thinking of her, she was already losing everything. And as Lily stood alone on the sidewalk, holding her small bag, the snow falling gently around her, she whispered to herself that Christmas miracles were not meant for people like her. Not knowing that her past, her pain, and her hidden secret were about to pull Alexander deeper into her world. And that this was only the beginning of the truth that would test both love and power in ways neither of them expected. On a freezing Christmas Eve, when snow covered the streets like a white blanket and the city lights shone brighter than ever, the Grand Aurora Hotel stood like a palace made of glass and gold, filled with music, laughter, and the soft sound of expensive shoes on marble floors. Because tonight was not just Christmas. It was a night of power, money, and destiny colliding. And inside the hotel's largest hall, the richest people of the city gathered under crystal chandeliers, holding glasses of wine, smiling faces, hiding sharp intentions. All waiting for one man, Alexander Reed, the young self-made millionaire whose name alone could open doors, change lives, and destroy empires, while 7 elite women stood close to the center of the hall like shining stars, each one rich, beautiful, confident, and powerful in her own way, dressed in designer gowns, wearing diamonds that cut the light with every move, each believing deep inside that tonight she would be the one to win Alexander's attention, because being chosen by him meant more than love. It meant status, victory, and control. Yet, while all eyes watched the entrance, no one noticed a quiet girl moving between tables with a silver tray in her shaking hands. A poor waitress named Lily Carter, whose life had never known luxury, whose shoes were worn, whose dress was borrowed, and whose smile was tired but kind. A girl who worked double shifts just to survive, who had skipped dinner so she could send money to her sick mother, and who believed Christmas was just another long night of work, not a miracle, as she carefully served guests who barely looked at her face, treating her like part of the furniture. Invisible and replaceable. Until suddenly, the doors opened wide, and Alexander Reed walked in. Tall, calm, and confident, wearing a simple black suit that somehow looked more powerful than all the glitter around him. His presence instantly changing the air, making conversations stop and hearts race, because he did not need to speak to command attention. And as the 7 elite women straightened their posture, fixed their smiles, and prepared their practiced charm, something unexpected happened. Alexander's eyes did not stop on them, did not follow the diamonds, did not admire the beauty on display. Instead, his gaze drifted across the hall and landed on Lily at the exact moment her hand slipped, the tray tilted, and a glass shattered on the floor with a sharp sound that cut through the music like a blade. Making the entire hall turn silent, Lily froze in fear, her face turning pale, as she whispered, "Apologies," knowing from experience that mistakes like this often meant shouting, humiliation, or losing her job. And as the manager rushed forward with anger in his eyes, the guests watched with bored expressions, used to seeing people like Lily punished. But before anyone could speak, Alexander stepped forward, his shoes echoing across the floor, and the silence grew heavier with every step he took toward the trembling waitress. The 7 elite women watching in shock and confusion as he passed them without a glance, because no one understood why the most powerful man in the room was walking toward a poor waitress. And when Alexander finally stopped in front of Lily, he bent down himself, picked up a piece of broken glass, and calmly told her not to worry, his voice steady and warm, a voice that did not judge. And Lily looked up at him, meeting his eyes for the first time, expecting anger, but finding only concern. And in that moment, something unseen passed between them, something quiet yet strong, like 2 lonely souls recognizing each other in a room full of noise, while the hall remained frozen. The manager speechless, the guests whispering, and the elite women feeling something dangerous rise inside them. Fear. Bekeski realized this night was not going according to plan, and as Alexander helped Lily stand and asked her name, she answered softly, embarrassed, unaware of who he really was, unaware that this simple moment would change her life forever. And while snow continued to fall outside, and Christmas lights blinked gently through the glass walls, fate had already chosen its path, because on this Christmas night, in a hall filled with riches and power, the heart of a millionaire had begun to beat for a poor waitress, and no one yet knew the storm that was about to follow. After that shocking moment, the Christmas party slowly returned to life. But something invisible had changed in the air, like a crack in glass that no one could fix, because whispers followed. Alexander and Lily, wherever they moved, the rich guests pretending to laugh while secretly watching every step, and the 7 elite women standing together with forced smiles that hid sharp thoughts, each one realizing the same painful truth for the first time in their perfect lives. They had been ignored, and not by just any man, but by Alexander Reed. The man they believed was already within their reach, and as Lily returned to her work with shaking hands and a heart beating too fast, she felt hundreds of eyes on her back, eyes filled with judgment, anger, and disbelief. Because in their world, a poor waitress was not supposed to be noticed, not supposed to matter, and certainly not supposed to stand between powerful women and what they wanted, while Alexander, instead of joining the elite circle prepared for him, chose a quiet corner of the hall, watching Lily from a distance, noticing small things no one else ever did, the way she apologized even when she did nothing wrong, the way she smiled politely even when guests spoke to her harshly, the way her shoulders carried the weight of a life full of struggle. And this only made the 7 women more restless, because each of them had used different weapons their whole lives to win beauty, money, influence, charm, and none of it had worked tonight. So the silent war began, without words, without open conflict, but with sharp looks and quiet plans. as one woman, Sophia, famous for her wealth and cold intelligence, decided to test Lily by calling her over again and again, making her run across the hall for small requests, watching closely to see if Alexander would notice, while another woman, Isabella, known for her beauty and powerful family name, laughed loudly and made sure Lily heard every cruel joke about girls who knew their place. And a third woman, Victoria.com and Dangerous, spoke softly to the hotel manager, reminding him who controlled many of the city's business deals, planting the idea that mistakes from staff should not be tolerated, all while Lily kept working, unaware of the growing storm around her, believing Alexander was just another kind guest, not knowing his name, not knowing his power, and not knowing that simply being herself had placed her in the middle of a battle she never asked for. While Alexander, on the other hand, felt something unfamiliar stirring inside him. Anger, not the kind he used in business, but a quiet anger at how silly people looked down on Lily, and when he noticed her being called again and again, her hands growing red from work, he finally stood up and asked the manager, calmly but firmly, to let Lily take a short break. A simple request. That shocked everyone, because powerful men never cared about waitresses. And as Lily sat alone near the back entrance, catching her breath, Alexander approached her. Not as a billionaire, but as a man, asking if she was okay, and Lily nodded quickly, forcing a smile, saying she was used to it, words that hit Alexander harder than any insult ever had, because no one should be used to being treated as nothing. And as they spoke briefly, sharing small, simple words about the cold weather, the long shift, and Christmas wishes, the 7 elite women watched from afar, their smiles gone now, replaced with tight lips and burning eyes, realizing that this was no longer about winning a man. It was about losing control, and somewhere between the soft Christmas music and the falling snow outside, the silent war grew stronger, setting the stage for jealousy, power, and cruelty. While Lily, innocent and tired, stood in the center of it all, unaware that this night had only just begun, and that the kindness she felt from Alexander would soon come at a painful cost.